Dr. Fairley-Pittman. It's always great to see you. Today we're going to be talking about your research. You recently gave a presentation at NASPA.
Yes, I did. Yep, in Baltimore. So it was nice to leave Boston for a little bit. And the conference was on student success in higher education. And one of the tiers was on first generation college students. That doesn't happen often, to be in a large space with professionals and folks that are very drilled in on that population. So it was refreshing to be there. And then for folks to be so considerate and passionate about all the sessions that were occurring around that population. And to your point earlier, I was able to present my research that focused specifically on first-gen students' success.
It's been a long time since we've been able to do in-person conferences. That must have been very energizing to see all those folks there. Title of your presentation was Hustle and Motivate, First Generation College Student Success. And I love that title. Can you tell me more about?
Yeah, I tried to be connected to some pop culture pieces. There's a song called Hustle and Motivate by Nipsey Hussle. And I love that song, and parts of that connects to so many parts of my life. But thinking about the first generation college student experience, yeah, it is hustle and motivate, and particularly motivate because my actual title for my research was understanding the motivational factors behind the success of low-income first-generation college students. So motivate is a pretty important word for me in my journey in this research. And so I was like, oh, hustle and motivate. It's connected, but it's not the whole title. And it hopefully feels a little bit more cool.
So what brought you to the research? How does this align with your work?
Yeah, I'm a student affairs practitioner at heart, and that's how I lead most of my work. My current role is a little bit more expansive. It's thinking about student development, but it's really thinking about campus development and large level experiences for students from all respects. And it has a lot of a global aspect because part of the role I'm doing is supporting first-year students who are taking part in Northeastern's Global Experience program. So they're starting their first year of college maybe in London, maybe they're starting it in Oakland, but part of that is being part of this global network, right? And so my role is, in many respects, making sure that all the pieces happen: academics, student life, just general campus things, facilities. And so it is a bit more dynamic, but I always lead with my background from student affairs, which is about how are we going to help this student through their personal and professional journey with us, right? So all of those pieces play into their personal and professional journey. And often we play different parts in that. And in my previous roles, I've been very targeted and connected to the student experience, from student involvement to working within a scholarship program specifically for first-gen students, or even most recently working in the honors program. Those were a bit more drilled in. I always come from the fact that the only way we can be successful, regardless of where you're coming from at the university, facilities to financial aid, is really leading with the idea that we're here to help the student through this experience, which again, some of them have personal reasons why they're there first. Some of them have professional reasons why they're there first. But regardless, those things are always intertwined throughout their journey, their 4 years.
So there's the tie-ins to all the work that you've been doing. So this was a natural outreach of that.
Yeah, I leaned into the topic of first-gen students from the start because I had a connection to this student experience, being first gen myself, and also my mom didn't finish college. It was always around me, but then my work really allowed me to be able to see it play out. And I was able to see the lack of support for these students on a higher level. And again, my work often has always been around supporting all sorts of marginalized students, and first gen students probably show up even though they're not tagged, right? They're still in the room. And then I say, you know what? I really want to make sure that for me, I want to dig deeper into the student experience, right? Have we really delved into really understanding how these students are navigating through the academy? And then I thought, well, I want to go with a more positive spin. And so I understand there might be lots of deficits to the student experience or flaws within their journey, but I know there's some success stories. And so I really wanted to understand what's helping you be successful. My research actually leaned on doing qualitative interviews with seniors because I figured they were the best target to get their understanding of their experience because they were on their way out. So they could be really reflective, they could really sit in their experience, but they also hopefully would know at that point what got them there because again, they're at the end. So they're like, oh yeah, let me look back. Oh yeah, in freshman year there was this, or sophomore year there was this, or there was this moment where I didn't know if I was going to make it. Here's how I pulled out. So I thought seniors were a good population to be able to lean into it because of their time.
Did your research validate what you read in literature, or were there any surprises?
Yeah, there was some validation about community. I think community rises to the top from the participants because for first-gen students, often family has been something, even though everyone comes from all sorts of backgrounds and journeys to get to where they're at. And I put low income in my title because that's a specific population that are often marginalized even more on college campuses. So I wanted to really know what that looked like. And that could lean into all sorts of stereotypes about what their family life might be like. But what I found was that their family was the most support system throughout their entire life, right? And in many ways, they often found themselves in guilt when they got to college because they were changing because of their location, their status. It is a status once you become a college student and then a graduate. So their status changed them in some ways, but their family was always still there for them, but they couldn't give them the same sort of support. Community rose to the top because they were reflective to say, I need a village, right? I need these people. This is the only way I actually made it through. Even back then when they couldn't relate, but they could relate more. I think pre-college folks have somewhat of a similar life experience. We go to high school, we go to middle school, right? Like I think depending again on folks' life experiences, but generally we all have experienced those things so people can tell you about it, right? They can give you some insight, right? Even though it might look different. But by the time you get to college, this changes. This is like the line in the sand, right? And so they're like, I still need this support group. And so community came up because these students were searching, or they were placed in communities that uplifted them in a way that allowed them to be able to have this new support system that was actually really connected to that specific life experience. We're both in college, we both maybe came from the same backgrounds, we might identify the same, and potentially, at least for the folks that I interviewed, we both need family. So having this other person and then maybe these other people, and that came in all sorts of ways. It came from a scholarship group or it came from an affinity group. So maybe if I identified as a student of color, I might have joined a specific student organization that I identify with, or if I identify as being queer, I might have joined the LGBT group. And then if you drill down, there's actual first gen spaces. Those places allowed them to persevere when they felt like there was nothing else in this academy for them. They had these people and this community to get them through. So I would say that was one of the largest revelations that I wasn't surprised, but it was really important for me to hear. What was a surprise was the personal responsibility and then the kind of pushback to say, I want higher ed administrators or I want scholar practitioners to hold me accountable to this experience, right? And I say that because a lot of the folks at my study were scholarship students. So they were saying, I held myself even more responsible for this education and my getting through because someone else cared so much that they gave me $250,000 to go to school, right? I owe them in some ways. And tied to that was also the idea around, why don't you showcase my lived experience at this campus, right? Again, I think maybe a first-gen student does receive a Fulbright scholarship, but at least from the participants that I was talking to, they were saying that they would never know that it was a first-gen student because you don't call it out. And that goes to a little bit of being prideful, right? they don't care that they're first gen. They're saying, yep, put that tag on there because I want folks to know that a first gen student can do this. And I think that was what they were coming from, of saying, oh, with my permission, call it out. I'm a first gen who is doing amazing things, right? And I can't believe, again, this is for a particular subset of students that receive funding to go to school. I can't believe someone else believed in me so much that they were able to give me this opportunity. And so those were things that were surprising to me to hear, because again, those are things you maybe want to see, or you maybe as a practitioner, I might have been advocating for, but now I have backing from folks that identify and live the college experience who are first gen to say, oh, that's what they actually want.
What do you think we as higher ed administrators should be doing or could be doing better?
I think we have to more resources to the student populations that truly need it. I think this is like an age-old gripe, right? I think with education is that sometimes we know who we're accepting. We know this student could potentially not get through here, but then we don't put any actual supports in place. And then when it doesn't happen and it proves us right, like, oh, this person didn't make it through, and we do that from the beginning, we don't do anything about it. So I say we could provide more resources to the known factors of the student body and the student experiences that we're bringing in. Like, we look a lot into so many people's lives before we accept them, that we could get an understanding of some of the things there. But what I can say is that we do provide resources to particular places and people. I just worked for an honors program, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing resources. There's the space, there's the people there. And again, it could have been more, sure, right? There could have been more people because the number of students, but it still was overwhelmingly resourced. And why? Because likely they are going to be the next doctors and lawyers and things of that sort. And we want to help them through and say that they did well when they were with us. I get it. But I think as an educator, and this is very earnest of me, I feel like we have the responsibility to do that for all the students that we choose to bring into our institutions, because then we're inherently not doing our job. Yeah.
Well said. What I should be asking?
That's a good question. I think that with the first gen student population, what you should be asking is, who are we leaving out? And that's what in the end of my research, what I left with was that we're the male identifying first gen students, right? Like, why aren't they willing to share their story? Because I'm sure that could open up a whole nother range of lived experiences that right now I'm really generalizing from a large majority of female identified students who met with me. So we're the male students in that respect. And then what I had to leave out, I wanted to put low income in this, which again, probably drilled down who I'm really speaking to in the end. But international students was something that I think about, particularly now because I work in this global eco, but also even back then when I remember presenting early on in my research when I was still working through it, but I still wanted to talk about it. So I was presenting and saying, hey, here's what I'm doing and here's what it looks like. And I was in a room with an international student who was like, I'm not there. I don't see me in your research, even though I identify as first gen. But they were like, what about this population? In many respects, I gave that same kind of spiel. Like, unfortunately, I have to drill down for this sort of way, but there's opportunities to think more about that experience. Because for me, in the institution that I work with, we have lots of international students, right? And some of them do identify as first gen. And there's lots of things we need to do to help those students transition to a US system, of course. And so there's a whole host of things that we need to provide for them. But then, of course, right, there's that student who's like, you're leaving me out. So those were the two big things that I walked away with. That could be a question of, where are the male students and what is the experience of first generation college students who are international?
I think this is a good taste of your research. I'm going to put a little link at the end of this video so that people can follow up with you and find more about the research that you've done. And pleasure talking to you as always.